3 knocks in a winter storm can change everything. When a dying child and his desperate father collapse at her door, Eliza Boone faces an impossible choice: turn them away and survive alone, or risk everything for strangers who might destroy the fragile life she's clawed together in these unforgiving mountains. But some debts can't be paid with kindness. Some men don't just take shelter, they bring danger with them. And when the truth finally arrives on horseback with guns drawn, Eliza will learn that the biggest threat wasn't the storm outside. It was the man she let in. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind didn't howl, it screamed. Eliza Boone stood at her kitchen window, watching the pines bend like they were trying to touch the ground. Snow came sideways, thick and mean, the kind that buried cattle standing up. She'd seen storms before, plenty of them in the 12 years since she'd moved to this mountain, but this one had teeth. She wrapped her shawl tighter and turned back to the stove. The fire inside was small, just enough to heat the cabin without wasting wood. Everything was rationed now. Wood, food, hope. She'd learned to make do with less, then learned to make do with even less than that. The cabin creaked. Another gust. The shutters rattled against their hinges, and somewhere outside something metal clanged loose. Probably the bucket by the well. She'd find it in the morning, assuming the storm didn't bury it 6 feet deep. Eliza ladled thin soup into a chipped bowl and sat at the table. 1 chair, 1 bowl, 1 lamp. The math of loneliness was simple enough. She was halfway through her first spoonful when she heard it. 3 knocks. Not the wind, not a branch. 3 deliberate knocks on her front door. Eliza froze, spoon suspended in midair. Nobody came up here. Not in winter. Not in weather like this. The nearest town was 8 miles down a road that turned to mud in spring and ice in winter, and her closest neighbor, Old Dutch Carmody, was 3 miles west and smart enough to stay inside when the sky turned this color. The knocks came again. Harder this time. More urgent. She set the spoon down slowly and stood. Her rifle leaned against the wall near the door where it always was. She picked it up, checked the chamber out of habit, and approached the door like it might bite. "Who's there?" No answer, just the wind, and then, "Please." A man's voice, rough and desperate. "Please, my son, he's dying." Eliza's hand tightened on the rifle. She'd heard plenty of stories, men who played wounded to get inside, drifters who'd kill you for a warm bed and whatever coins you had tucked away. This mountain wasn't kind to women living alone, and she'd survived this long by trusting her gut more than her heart. "Step back from the door," she called out. A pause. Then the sound of boots scraping on wood. She cracked the door open, rifle aimed chest high. The man standing on her porch looked half dead himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, but swaying like a tree about to fall. His hat was frozen to his head, his coat crusted with ice. But it was his eyes that stopped her, dark, desperate, and completely empty of threat. Just exhaustion and fear. In his arms was a boy. Small, maybe 6 or 7, wrapped in a blanket that had gone stiff with frost. The child's face was gray. "I didn't know where else to go," the man said. His voice cracked. "I saw your light." Eliza's grip on the rifle slackened. She looked at the boy's face, lips blue, eyes closed, chest barely moving. Every instinct she'd honed over 12 hard years screamed at her to shut the door, to protect herself, to survive. But she'd been cold once. So cold she thought she'd die. And someone had pulled her inside. "Get in," she said, stepping back. The man didn't wait for her to change her mind. He stumbled through the door, snow falling off him in clumps, and headed straight for the fire. Eliza shut the door against the wind and bolted it. "Put him on the bed," she said, nodding toward the small cot in the corner. The man laid the boy down with a gentleness that didn't match his size. His hands shook as he unwrapped the frozen blanket. Eliza leaned the rifle against the wall, close enough, and moved to the bed. The boy was worse up close. His skin was waxy, his breathing shallow and irregular. Frostbite darkened his fingertips. "How long's he been like this?" she asked. "Since this morning." The man pulled off his hat with stiff fingers. His hair was dark, streaked with gray at the temples. We got caught in the open when the storm hit. I couldn't find shelter fast enough. Eliza grabbed the blankets from her own bed and piled them onto the boy. I need hot water, cloth. Can you move? I can move. Then get the kettle from the stove and pour it into that basin, she pointed. Not too hot, warm, and don't spill it. He moved like a man underwater, slow but determined. Eliza pulled off the boy's boots and socks. His feet were ice. She started rubbing them gently, trying to coax warmth back into the skin without damaging it further. The man brought the basin over and Eliza dipped a cloth into the water. She worked quickly, methodically, wringing out the cloth and pressing it to the boy's hands, his feet, his face. The whole time, the man stood there watching, useless and terrified. What's his name? Eliza asked, not looking up. Caleb. And yours? A pause, just long enough to notice. Rowan. She glanced at him. He met her eyes, then looked away. People who hesitated over their own name were usually lying. But she didn't press. Not yet. Sit down before you fall down, she said. You're no good to him dead. Rowan sank into the chair like his legs had given out. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at his son. Will he make it? I don't know, Eliza said honestly. But he's breathing. That's something. She kept working, kept warming, kept watching the boy's color slowly shift from gray to pale pink. His breathing evened out. His fingers twitched. An hour passed, maybe 2. The storm battered the cabin, but inside the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the quiet rasp of Caleb's breathing. Finally, the boy's eyes fluttered open. Papa? His voice was small, confused. Rowan was on his feet in an instant, kneeling beside the bed. I'm here, son. I'm right here. Caleb blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused. Then he looked at Eliza. Who's that? A friend, Rowan said quietly. She helped you. Eliza snorted softly. Wouldn't go that far, but she pulled another blanket over the boy anyway. Caleb's eyes closed again, but this time it was sleep, not unconsciousness. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Rowan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. He looked at Eliza, and for the first time, something other than desperation crossed his face. Thank you. Eliza stood and wiped her hands on her apron. Don't thank me yet. Storm's not over. She moved to the stove and ladled out 2 more bowls of soup. She set one in front of Rowan and kept the other for herself. He stared at it like he didn't know what to do. Eat, she said. You're no use to him if you starve. Rowan picked up the spoon. His hands were still shaking, but he managed. He ate slowly, mechanically, like a man who'd forgotten what food tasted like. Eliza sat across from him and watched. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe 40. Hard years, though, the kind that carved lines deep and left scars you couldn't always see. Where were you headed? She asked. West. He didn't look up from his bowl. West is a big place. Big enough. She tilted her head. Running from something or to something? His jaw tightened. Does it matter? It does if you're bringing trouble to my door. He set the spoon down and finally met her eyes. I'm not here to cause you trouble. I just needed to get him warm. Once the storm breaks, we'll be gone. Storm like this could last 3 days, Eliza said. Rowan's face went carefully blank. Then we'll stay out of your way. She studied him, the way he held himself, the way he didn't quite meet her eyes, the way his hand kept drifting toward his coat pocket, like he was checking for something. A gun, maybe. Or papers. Or money. You got family out west? She asked. No. Friends? No. Work waiting for you? Not yet. Eliza leaned back in her chair. So you're just drifting. Something like that. She didn't believe him, but she also didn't care enough to push. People came to the mountains for 2 reasons, to hide or to disappear. Sometimes both. She'd done the same thing once. You can sleep by the fire, she said. I'll take the chair. You don't have to. I'm not offering out of kindness, Eliza interrupted. I'm offering because if you collapse in the night, I'm not dragging you anywhere. So take the floor and stay out of my way. Rowan nodded slowly. Understood. She stood and moved to the bed, checking Caleb one more time. His color was better, his breathing steady. She pulled the blankets up to his chin and stepped back. Rowan was watching her. "You know what you're doing," he said quietly. "I've kept myself alive this long." She turned away. "That's all the expertise I've got." The fire popped. The wind howled. And outside, the storm buried the world in white. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat in her chair by the window, rifle across her lap, and watched the snow fall. Every so often, she glanced at the two strangers in her cabin. The man stretched out on the floor near the fire, the boy curled under a mountain of blankets. Rowan didn't sleep either. She could tell by the way his breathing never evened out, the way his shoulders stayed tense even when he closed his eyes. Smart man. You didn't survive long by trusting too easily. She respected that. As the night dragged on, Eliza found herself thinking about the last time someone had knocked on her door. 4 years ago. A peddler selling tin pots and lies. She'd bought a pot and listened to the lies because it had been nice to hear a voice that wasn't her own. He'd left the next morning and taken her grandmother's silver spoons with him. She'd learned. But this was different. The boy was real. The desperation was real. And whatever Rowan was running from, it was real too. Around midnight, Caleb stirred. He made a small sound, and Rowan was on his feet instantly, moving to the bed. "Papa?" "I'm here." "I'm cold." Rowan pulled the blankets tighter around him. "I know, just sleep." "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe." Caleb's eyes drifted to Eliza. "Is she nice?" Rowan hesitated, then quietly, "Yeah, she's nice." Eliza said nothing. She turned back to the window, but something in her chest shifted. Just a little. Oh. By dawn, the storm had settled into a steady, relentless snowfall. The wind had died down, but the sky was still the color of old iron. Eliza woke. She must have dozed off at some point, and found Rowan crouched by the fire, feeding it small sticks. He moved quietly, efficiently, like a man who knew how to make himself useful. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He glanced back. "Seemed fair?" She stood and stretched, her back protesting. Sleeping in a chair was a young woman's game, and she wasn't young anymore. Rowan straightened. "He's still asleep." "Good." Eliza moved to the stove and started pulling out what little food she had. Cornmeal, dried beans, half a slab of salt pork. "You eat meat?" "When I can get it." She started slicing the pork. "How long since you've had a real meal?" "A while." "Thought so. You look like hell." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Thanks." Wasn't a compliment. She fried the pork and made cornmeal mush, stretching what she had to feed 3 instead of 1. When it was ready, she set 2 plates on the table and brought a smaller portion to Caleb. The boy was awake, sitting up in bed and looking around with wide eyes. "Morning," Eliza said. "Morning, ma'am." "You feel better?" He nodded. "My hands still hurt." "They'll hurt for a few days, but they'll heal." She handed him the plate. "Eat." Caleb looked at the food like it was Christmas. He dug in without another word. Rowan sat at the table and watched his son eat. The relief on his face was so raw it almost hurt to look at. Eliza sat across from him and started on her own food. "Thank you," Rowan said again. "You already said that." "I mean it." She shrugged. "I didn't do it for you." They ate in silence. Outside, the snow kept falling. After a while, Caleb spoke up. "Papa, can we stay here?" Rowan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "We're leaving as soon as the storm clears, son." "But it's warm here, and she's nice." "Caleb, I like it here." Rowan set his fork down and rubbed his face. "We'll talk about it later." Eliza kept her eyes on her plate. She didn't want to get involved, didn't want to care, but the boy's voice, hopeful, innocent, scraped against something she'd thought she'd buried years ago. "Storm's not clearing anytime soon," she said quietly. "You're stuck here for at least another day, maybe 2. Rowan looked at her. "We'll stay out of your way." "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." "Then prove it." She stood and started clearing the plates. "There's work that needs doing. Shutters need fixing. Firewood needs stacking. Roof's got a leak I can't reach. You want to earn your keep, start there." Rowan stood as well. "I'll start now." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "I'm handy with repairs. If you've got tools, I can do more than just patch. Eliza raised an eyebrow. You know your way around a hammer? I know my way around most things. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Tools are in the shed. Don't lose anything. I won't. He pulled on his coat, still damp from the night before, and headed for the door. Before he left, he glanced back at Caleb, who was still sitting in bed, watching everything with curious eyes. Behave, Rowan said. I will, Papa. The door closed behind him, and the cabin felt suddenly smaller. Eliza looked at the boy. The boy looked back. You gonna sit there all day? She asked. Am I allowed to move? You're not a prisoner. Caleb slid out of bed, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. He padded over to the window and pressed his nose against the glass. It's really coming down, he said. It does that up here. Do you like the snow? I tolerate it. Caleb tilted his head. That's a funny way to say no. Eliza almost smiled. Almost. You're a funny kid. Papa says I ask too many questions. Do you? Probably. This time she did smile. Just a little. The day passed slowly. Rowan worked outside. Eliza could hear the rhythmic thud of the axe, the scrape of wood on wood. He didn't come inside except to grab tools or warm his hands by the fire. He didn't ask for breaks. Didn't complain. Caleb stayed near the fire, wrapped in blankets, and peppered Eliza with questions. How long have you lived here? 12 years. By yourself? Mostly. Don't you get lonely? Eliza paused in her mending. Sometimes. Why don't you live in town? Town's loud. I like loud. Then you'd hate it here. Caleb grinned. I don't hate it. Eliza shook her head and went back to her stitching. The boy was relentless, but there was something about him, something open and unguarded, that made it hard to stay annoyed. By late afternoon, Rowan came back inside, snow in his hair and exhaustion in his eyes. But he'd stacked enough wood to last a week, patched the shutters, and cleared the snow from around the door. Roof's next, he said, pulling off his gloves. But I'll need daylight. You've done enough for today, Eliza said. He looked at her like he didn't believe her. Sit, she said, before you fall over. Rowan sat. Caleb immediately climbed into the chair next to him and started chattering about everything he'd seen through the window, the deer tracks, the way the icicles looked like swords, the crow that had landed on the fence post. Rowan listened with the patience of a man who'd heard it all before but didn't mind hearing it again. Eliza made more soup. It was thinner than before, but it was warm. They ate together. The three of them. And for the first time in years, Eliza's table didn't feel quite so empty. That night, as Caleb slept and Rowan tended the fire, Eliza sat in her chair and watched them both. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she didn't distrust him either, and that was something. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, for the first time in a long time, the cabin felt almost warm. The second day of the storm came with no sign of breaking. Eliza woke to find Rowan already up, feeding the fire again. Caleb was still asleep, his small form barely visible under the pile of blankets. You don't sleep much, she observed. Old habit. Rowan didn't turn around. Bad dreams or bad conscience? He glanced at her then, something sharp in his eyes, but he didn't answer. Eliza let it go. After breakfast, more cornmeal, stretched even thinner, Rowan went back to work. This time, he tackled the roof. Eliza watched from the window as he climbed up, sure-footed despite the ice, and started patching the leak she'd been ignoring for months. Caleb sat at the table, drawing pictures in the condensation on the window. Your pa's good with his hands, Eliza said. He can fix anything, Caleb said proudly. Once, he built a whole barn in 2 days. That's so? Well, he had help, but he did most of it. Eliza tilted her head. What'd he do before this? Caleb's face scrunched up. I don't know. He doesn't talk about before. Before what? Before we started moving. The boy said it so casually, like it was normal, like running was just part of life. Eliza felt that familiar prickle of unease. How long have you been moving? She asked carefully. Caleb shrugged. A long time. Since I was really little. And your ma? His face fell. She died when I was born. Eliza's chest tightened. I'm sorry. It's okay. I never knew her. He brightened a little. But Papa says she was really pretty and smart. He says I have her eyes. Eliza looked at the boy, at his dark eyes, too old for his face, and wondered what kind of life he'd had. Always moving, always running, always looking over his shoulder. Later that afternoon, Rowan came inside, his work finished. The roof was patched, the shutters reinforced, and the woodpile was now twice the size it had been. You didn't have to do all that, Eliza said. I know. So why did you? He met her eyes. Because you saved my son's life, and because I don't take charity without paying it back. It wasn't charity, it was common decency. Same thing where I come from. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. That evening, after another thin meal, Caleb asked if Eliza had any books. One, she said, pulling a battered copy of Gulliver's Travels from the shelf. Caleb's face lit up. Can you read it to me? I'm not much of a reader-outer. Please? She looked at Rowan, who just shrugged. So Eliza sat by the fire, the boy curled up next to her, and read. Her voice was rough, unpracticed, but Caleb didn't seem to mind. He listened with rapt attention, asking questions every few pages. Rowan sat across from them, watching. And for a moment, the cabin felt less like a shelter and more like a home. Assam. On the third day, the storm finally broke. The sky cleared to a pale, brittle blue, and the sun came out, weak but present. The world outside was buried under 3 feet of snow, but the air was still. Rowan stood at the window, staring out at the horizon. We should go, he said quietly. Eliza, mending a shirt by the fire, didn't look up. Road's not passable yet. We'll manage. You'll freeze. We've frozen before. She set down her needle. Why are you in such a hurry? Rowan's jaw tightened. Because I don't want to overstay my welcome. You haven't. He turned to look at her, surprised. Eliza shrugged. You've worked. You've helped. You've kept to yourself. That's more than most people do. Still, Rowan said, we should go. Why? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Eliza saw it. Fear. Not of her, of something else, something he wasn't saying. What are you running from? She asked. Nothing. Liar. His face hardened. It's not your concern. It is if it follows you here. It won't. You sure about that? Rowan didn't answer. Eliza stood and crossed to him. She looked him straight in the eye. I've lived alone on this mountain for 12 years. I've survived droughts, floods, wolves, and worse. I'm not scared of much, but I don't like being lied to. I'm not lying. You're not telling the whole truth either. They stared at each other. The fire crackled. Caleb, oblivious, hummed softly to himself in the corner. Finally, Rowan exhaled. There are people looking for me. Dangerous people. I can't... He stopped. I can't let them find him. Who's looking for you? It doesn't matter. It does to me. Why? Rowan's voice rose slightly. Why do you care? Because you're standing in my cabin, Eliza snapped. Because your son is sitting in my bed. Because if someone comes looking for you, they'll find me too. Rowan flinched. Eliza took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. I'm not asking you to spill your whole life story, but if you're bringing trouble here, I deserve to know. Rowan looked away. I'm not trying to bring you trouble. I'm trying to keep it away. Then tell me what I'm up against. He was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, a man named Victor Kane. He's powerful, connected, and he wants something from me. What? My name. Eliza frowned. Your name. My real name. Rowan's voice was barely above a whisper. And everything that comes with it. Before Eliza could ask what that meant, Caleb called out from the bed. Papa, can we stay one more night, please? Rowan closed his eyes. Caleb, please. It's warm here, and Miss Eliza's nice, and I like it. Rowan looked at Eliza. She saw the question in his eyes. She should have said no, should have sent them on their way, should have protected herself. But instead she heard herself say, "One more night." Relief washed over Rowan's face. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Eliza muttered, because deep down she knew, whatever trouble Rowan was running from, it was only a matter of time before it caught up. And when it did, all three of them would pay the price. One more night turned into 3, then 5, then a week. The snow kept coming, not in storms anymore, but in steady, persistent waves that made the road down the mountain impossible. Rowan didn't mention leaving again, and Eliza didn't bring it up. There was an unspoken agreement between them now they'd deal with reality when reality forced its way back in. In the meantime, life found a rhythm. Rowan worked. Not because Eliza asked, but because he seemed incapable of sitting still. He rebuilt the chicken coop she'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. He reinforced the shed. He even started on the sagging porch steps, working in the bitter cold until his hands were raw. Eliza watched him from the window one morning, her coffee growing cold in her hands. "He's going to work himself to death," she muttered. Caleb, sitting at the table with a piece of charcoal and paper Eliza had scrounged up, looked up. "Papa doesn't know how to rest." "I noticed. Mama used to make him sit down. She'd say, 'Rowan Hale, if you don't stop fixing things, you're going to fix yourself right into the ground.'" The boy's voice went high and sing-song, mimicking someone he'd never actually heard. "Papa told me that story once." Eliza turned. "Hale? That his last name?" Caleb's face went carefully blank. "I don't know. Maybe I made it up." The boy was a terrible liar. He got that from his father. Eliza didn't push, but she filed the name away. Later that afternoon, Rowan came inside with an armload of wood and stopped short when he saw the table. Eliza had put out bread, actual bread, not hardtack, and a pot of stew that smelled like more than just salt and water. "Where'd you get meat?" he asked. "Snared a rabbit this morning while you were playing carpenter." He set the wood down by the fire. "You went out alone?" "I've been doing it for 12 years. "In this snow?" "In worse." She ladled stew into 3 bowls. "Sit down before it gets cold." Rowan sat, but his eyes lingered on her. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or respect, or both. Caleb dug into his food with the enthusiasm of a boy who'd been living on scraps for too long. "This is really good, Miss Eliza." "It's rabbit stew, nothing fancy. It's the best thing I've had in forever." Rowan ate more slowly, but she noticed he finished every bite. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her. "You're a better shot than me," he said. "I'd hope so. I've had more practice. Still, that's not an easy thing, trapping in snow like this." Eliza shrugged. "You do what you have to." "You always this stubborn? You always this nosy?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less haunted. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Caleb giggled, and the sound filled the cabin like sunlight. That night after Caleb had fallen asleep, Eliza and Rowan sat by the fire. She was mending again, always mending, and he was whittling a piece of wood into something she couldn't quite identify yet. "What are you making?" she asked. "A horse, for Caleb." "You any good at carving?" "Not really, but he won't care." She watched his hands move, steady and sure despite his claim. "You're better than you think." "At carving?" "At most things." He glanced up, surprised. Eliza kept her eyes on her stitching. "You're good with your hands, good with your boy. You work hard and you don't complain. That's more than most men I've met." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "You don't know me." "I know enough." "You know what I've shown you. That's not the same thing." She set down her needle and looked at him. "Then show me the rest." His jaw tightened. "You don't want to see the rest." "Why not?" "Because it's not pretty." "I'm not asking for pretty," Eliza said. "I'm asking for honest." Rowan's hand stilled on the carving. He stared at the half-formed horse like it held answers he didn't have. "I told you about Victor Kane," he said finally. "What I didn't tell you is why he's after me." "I'm listening." He took a breath. "My father built the Trans-Mountain Railroad. You heard of it?" Eliza's stomach dropped. Everyone had heard of it. The railroad that connected the eastern cities to the western territories, making fortunes for everyone involved. Your father was Thomas Hale? Yeah. The Thomas Hale? The one who died 5 years ago and left everything to... She stopped, stared at him. You. Rowan didn't deny it. Eliza stood up, the mending falling to the floor. You're telling me you're the heir to the Hale Railroad fortune? Was. I walked away from it. Why? Because they wanted to own me. His voice was flat, emotionless. My father died and left me everything. The company, the money, the legacy. But it came with strings. The board wanted me to marry someone they chose, live where they told me to live, run the company the way they wanted it run. I wasn't a son to them. I was an asset. So you left. So I ran. He looked at her. I took Caleb and disappeared, changed our names, kept moving. I thought if I stayed gone long enough, they'd give up, find someone else to wear the Hale name. But they didn't. No, they hired Kane to find me. He's not just a land agent, he's a fixer, the kind of man who doesn't stop until he gets what he wants. Eliza sank back into her chair. And what does he want? Me? Back in Philadelphia, wearing a suit, signing papers, playing the part. Rowan's hands clenched around the carving. Or he'll take Caleb and make sure I never see him again. The fire popped. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. That's why you keep running, Eliza said quietly. That's why I can't stop. She looked at him, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man waiting for the next blow to fall. You can't run forever, she said. I know. So what's your plan? I don't have one. He laughed bitterly. I just keep moving and hope I stay ahead. Eliza shook her head. That's not a plan. That's desperation. You got a better idea? She didn't. But she also didn't like the thought of this man, this good man, despite everything, spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. How'd Kane find you before? She asked. I got careless. Stayed in one place too long. Used my real name to buy supplies. He shook his head. I won't make that mistake again. But he knows you're heading west. He knows I was heading west. We could be anywhere by now. Unless he's already here. Rowan's face went hard. He's not. You sure about that? I'd know. Eliza wasn't convinced, but she let it drop, for now. The days blurred together after that. The snow kept falling, lighter now, but constant. Rowan kept working. Caleb kept drawing and asking questions and filling the cabin with life. And Eliza kept watching the road, waiting for trouble that hadn't arrived yet. One morning she woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee. Not the chicory substitute she'd been stretching for months. She sat up and saw Rowan at the stove pouring 2 cups. Where'd you get that? She asked. He handed her a cup. I had some in my pack. Figured you could use it more than me. She took it, inhaling the steam. You've been holding out on me. Saving it for the right moment. And this is it? You let us stay. You fed us. You kept my son alive. He met her eyes. Yeah. This is it. Eliza sipped the coffee and tried not to let him see how much the gesture meant. It had been so long since someone had done something kind without expecting anything in return. Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome. They drank in comfortable silence. Outside, a deer picked its way through the snow, cautious and graceful. You ever think about leaving? Rowan asked. The mountain? Yeah. Eliza shook her head. This is home. Even alone? Especially alone. She paused. I tried town living once. Didn't take. Why not? Too many people, too many rules, too many folks thinking they knew what was best for me. She looked at him. Sound familiar? He smiled faintly. Yeah, it does. So I came here. Built this place with my own hands. It's not much, but it's mine. It's more than most people have. Maybe. She set down her cup. But it's lonely sometimes. Rowan didn't respond, but she saw understanding in his eyes. Later that day, Caleb came running in from outside, his cheeks red from the cold. Miss Eliza! Miss Eliza! There's a fox! She looked up from her work. Where? By the shed, a red one. Can I keep it? No. Please? Foxes aren't pets, Caleb. But it's so pretty. Rowan, leaning against the doorframe, shook his head. Listen to Miss Eliza. Caleb's face fell, but he didn't argue. He trudged back outside, muttering about how unfair it was that you couldn't keep wild things. Eliza watched him go. He's a good kid. He is. You're doing right by him. Rowan's expression darkened. I'm keeping him on the run. I'm keeping him from having a home, friends, a normal life. I'm not sure that's doing right. You're keeping him safe. That's what matters. Is it? Rowan pushed off the doorframe and crossed to the window. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being selfish. If I should have stayed and fought instead of running. And risk losing him? At least he'd have a home. He has you, Eliza said firmly. That's more than a home. That's everything. Rowan didn't answer, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. That evening, Eliza taught Caleb how to play checkers using buttons and a board she'd drawn on a piece of wood. The boy picked it up quickly, his face scrunched in concentration. You're good at this, Eliza said, watching him plan his next move. Papa taught me chess once, but we lost the pieces. Where'd you lose them? Caleb's face clouded. When we had to leave fast, we left a lot of things behind. Eliza's chest tightened. She glanced at Rowan, who was staring into the fire, his jaw tight. Well, she said, forcing brightness into her voice, checkers is more fun anyway. Caleb grinned and jumped 3 of her pieces. I win. You cheated. Did not. Did too. Papa, did I cheat? Rowan looked over, a smile tugging at his mouth despite everything. I'm staying out of this one. Eliza laughed, and the sound surprised her. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed? She couldn't remember. The next morning, Eliza woke to silence. Not the comfortable silence of snow and solitude, but something heavier. Wrong. She sat up and looked around. Rowan's bedroll was empty. The fire was burning low, and Caleb was still asleep, thank the stars. She pulled on her boots and grabbed her rifle. Stepped outside into the pale dawn light. Rowan was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring down the mountain road. His whole body was tense, coiled like a spring. Eliza approached quietly. What is it? Tracks, he said without turning around. Fresh ones. Someone came up the road last night. Her blood ran cold. How many? 2 horses, maybe 3. Could be Dutch, my neighbor. On a night like that? Rowan shook his head. Nobody travels in the dark unless they're looking for something. Or someone. Eliza tightened her grip on the rifle. You think it's Kane? I think we need to be ready. They stood there in the cold, watching the road, waiting. Nothing moved. No horses, no men, just the wind and the trees and the endless snow. But Eliza felt it now, that creeping dread she'd been pushing down for days. It was here, the trouble Rowan had been running from, and it was closing in. We should leave, Rowan said quietly, today, before they come back. The road's still bad. I don't care. Rowan, I won't risk you, he said, turning to face her. You've done enough, more than enough. But if Kane finds us here, he'll burn this place to the ground just to make a point. I can't let that happen. Eliza met his eyes, saw the fear there, the guilt. I'm not scared of Victor Kane, she said. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. She stepped closer. And I'm not letting you run again. Not until we know what we're dealing with. Eliza, this is my land, my home. If someone's coming for it, I have a right to know. Rowan stared at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right, but we do this my way. We prepare. We watch. And if Kane shows up, we don't fight. We leave. Agreed. They went back inside. Caleb was awake now, rubbing his eyes. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing, Rowan said, his voice calm. Just checking the weather. Caleb didn't look convinced, but he didn't press. Eliza made breakfast. Rowan loaded his rifle, and both of them kept one eye on the road. The day dragged. Every sound made Eliza jump. Every shadow looked like a rider. but no one came. By evening, she started to think maybe Rowan had been wrong. Maybe the tracks were just Dutch after all, or a lost trapper, or… The knock came just after sundown. 3 sharp raps, deliberate, familiar. Eliza and Rowan locked eyes across the cabin. Caleb froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "Stay here," Rowan whispered. He moved to the door, rifle in hand. Eliza grabbed her own gun and positioned herself near the window. The knock came again. Harder this time. "Open up," a voice called. Deep, authoritative, used to being obeyed. "I know you're in there." Rowan's face went pale. "Kane." Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. "What do we do?" "We don't open the door. He'll break it down." "Then we go out the back." "There is no back door." The voice came again, closer now, right outside. "Rowan Hale, I know you're in there. Come out and we can settle this like civilized men." Caleb whimpered. Eliza moved to him, pulling him close. Rowan stood frozen, torn between running and fighting and protecting, and then the door shook as someone threw their weight against it. Eliza raised her rifle. "Don't! Eliza, this is my home," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "And nobody breaks down my door." She crossed to the door and yanked it open. Standing on her porch were 3 men. The one in front was tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Victor Kane. Behind him stood 2 others, hired muscle by the look of them, armed, dangerous. Kane's smile widened when he saw her. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm looking for a man named Rowan Hale. I believe he's staying with you." Eliza kept the rifle level. "Get off my property." "Now there's no need for hostility. I said get off my property." Kane's smile faded. His eyes flicked past her into the cabin. "Rowan, there you are. We've been looking for you." Rowan stepped forward, putting himself between Kane and Caleb. "I'm not going back. That's not your decision to make. It's the only decision I have left." Kane sighed like a father disappointed in a wayward child. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The board just wants you home, back where you belong. I don't belong there. You're a Hale. You belong wherever the company needs you." Kane's gaze shifted to Caleb, still huddled behind Eliza. "And so does he." Rowan's whole body went rigid. "You leave him out of this. He's part of this. He's your son, the future of the Hale legacy." Kane smiled again, cold and calculating. "Unless you'd prefer I take him back alone. I'm sure the board can arrange proper schooling, proper guardians. Over my dead body. That can be arranged." The cabin went silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Eliza stepped forward, rifle still raised. "You've got 3 seconds to get off my porch before I put a hole in you." Kane's eyes flicked to her. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." "It does when you're standing on my land threatening people under my roof." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply delivering a message." "Message delivered. Now leave." Kane studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled again. "You know, I did some checking on you, Miss Boone. Eliza Boone, isn't it? 12 years on this mountain, all alone. No family, no husband, just you and this little piece of dirt." He paused. "I also learned something interesting. You owe back taxes, 3 years' worth. And the county's getting impatient." Eliza's blood turned to ice. "Now, I'm a reasonable man," Kane continued. "I could help with that. Make those debts disappear. All you have to do is step aside and let me take Mr. Hale back where he belongs. I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale, Miss Boone. It's just a matter of price." Rowan moved forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Leave her alone, Kane. This is between you and me." "Oh, I agree. But Miss Boone seems determined to make it her business." Kane's smile turned sharp. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me, Rowan, willingly. And in return, I'll make sure Miss Boone keeps her land. I'll even throw in enough money to see her through the winter. And if I refuse? Then I take you anyway, and Miss Boone loses everything." The words hung in the air like a noose. Eliza looked at Rowan, saw the defeat settling over him like a shroud. "Don't," she said. "Don't you dare." "I don't have a choice," Rowan said quietly. "There's always a choice." "Not this time." He looked at Caleb, his eyes full of pain, then back at Cain. You promise you'll leave her alone? Leave this place alone? You have my word. Your word's worth less than dirt. Cain shrugged. It's all I'm offering. Rowan stood there, torn and broken. Then, slowly, he set down his rifle. No, Caleb cried, running forward. Papa, don't! Rowan caught his son and held him tight. It's okay. It's going to be okay. It's not. He's lying. He's going to hurt you. I know, son, but I have to go. Eliza felt something crack inside her chest. She stepped forward, her voice low and fierce. If you walk out that door, you're giving up, and I don't take you for a quitter. Rowan met her eyes. I'm protecting you. I don't need protecting. I need you to fight. I've been fighting my whole life, Eliza. I'm tired. Then rest, but don't surrender. For a moment, she thought he might listen, thought he might stay. But then he let go of Caleb and turned to Cain. I'll go, but you leave them out of it, both of them. Cain smiled. Of course. Rowan grabbed his coat and walked toward the door. Caleb screamed and tried to follow, but Eliza held him back, her heart breaking. At the threshold, Rowan paused. He looked back at Eliza one last time. Thank you, he said, for everything. Then he stepped out into the night. The door closed, and Eliza was alone again. Caleb screamed until his voice broke. Eliza held him as he thrashed and sobbed, trying to break free, trying to run after his father. But she held tight, even as his small fists beat against her arms, even as her own throat closed up with rage and helplessness. Through the window, she watched Cain's men drag Rowan toward their horses. He didn't fight, didn't resist, just walked like a man heading to his own hanging. The horses disappeared into the darkness, and the sound of hooves faded until there was nothing left but Caleb's broken crying and the wind outside. Eliza sank to the floor, still holding the boy. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fix this. So she just held him and let him cry. Eventually, the sobs turned to hiccups, then to silence. Caleb went limp in her arms, exhausted, hollowed out. He's not coming back, the boy whispered. Eliza's jaw tightened. We don't know that. He left me. He was trying to protect you. I don't want to be protected. Caleb pulled away, his face red and tear-streaked. I want my papa. I know. You don't know. You don't know anything. He shoved at her, stumbled back and ran to the bed, burying his face in the blankets. Eliza sat there on the floor, alone again. She looked at the door Rowan had walked through, at the empty space he'd left behind, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fury. She stood slowly, her hands shaking, not from fear, from anger. Cain had come into her home, threatened her, used her debts like a weapon, and Rowan had just let him, had just walked away, like she was some fragile thing that needed saving. She crossed to the window and stared out at the dark mountain road, her land, her home, and some bastard in a fancy coat thought he could take it from her with a few words and empty promises. Eliza Boone had survived 12 winters alone on this mountain. She'd buried her past, built her life from nothing, and carved out a place that was hers. She'd faced down wolves and drought and men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. And she was damned if she was going to lose it now. She grabbed her coat. Where are you going? Caleb's voice was small, muffled by the blankets. To get answers. From who? Someone who might actually tell me the truth. She strapped on her boots, loaded her rifle, and walked out into the cold night. The ride to Dutch Carmody's place took an hour through snow that tried to drag her horse down with every step. By the time Eliza reached his cabin, her fingers were numb and her face felt like leather. She dismounted and pounded on his door. Dutch opened it with a shotgun in his hands. When he saw her, he lowered it. Eliza? What in the hell are you doing out here this time of night? I need information. About what? Victor Cain. Dutch's face went carefully neutral. Who? Don't play dumb with me, Dutch. I know you hear things. I know you've got connections in town. The old man sighed and stepped back. Get inside before you freeze. His cabin was smaller than hers, cluttered with traps and pelts and the accumulated junk of a man who'd lived alone too long. He poured her coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the stove for 3 days. Victor Cain, Dutch said, sitting down across from her. What's he done to you? He came to my cabin tonight. Took a man I was sheltering. The stranger? The one with the boy? Eliza's eyes narrowed. How'd you know about them? I know about everything that happens on this mountain, girl. You should know that by now. He sipped his coffee. Those tracks you probably saw? That was me. Came up to check on you during the storm. Saw smoke from 2 chimneys instead of 1. Figured you had company. Why didn't you stop? Because you're a grown woman who can handle herself, and because I mind my own business. He leaned back. So, Kane took your stranger. What do you want from me? I want to know who he is, what he wants, and how I stop him. Dutch let out a low whistle. That's a tall order. Can you help me or not? The old man studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and rummaged through a pile of newspapers stacked in the corner. He pulled one out and tossed it on the table. Eliza picked it up. The headline read, Hail Heir Still Missing. Railroad Board Offers Reward. Below it was a sketch of a man's face, Rowan's face. Her stomach dropped. Your stranger's got a price on his head, Dutch said. $10,000 to anyone who brings him back alive. Kane's been hunting him for 6 months. Half the territories know about it by now. Eliza stared at the sketch, at the description beneath it. Missing heir to the Trans Mountain Railroad fortune. Last seen in St. Louis. Considered dangerous. He's not dangerous, she said quietly. Maybe not to you, but to the railroad board. He's a runaway asset, and Kane's the man they hired to bring him home. Why does the board care so much? Can't they just appoint someone else? Dutch shook his head. It's not about running the railroad. It's about control. Thomas Hale's will left everything to his son, Rowan. The board can't touch the money or the land without him. So long as he's gone, they're stuck. And if they get him back? They'll put him in a suit, marry him off to some society woman, and use him like a puppet. He'll sign whatever they tell him to sign, do whatever they tell him to do. And they'll bleed that railroad dry while he watches. Eliza felt sick. That's why he ran. Smart man, but running only works if you stay ahead, and Kane doesn't quit. She looked up at Dutch. What else do you know? The old man hesitated. There's talk in town. Kane's been sniffing around, asking about land deeds, specifically land along the mountain pass. What for? Railroad expansion. The board wants to run a new line through here, straight through the mountains and out to the coast. Would make them millions. Eliza's blood ran cold. My land. Your land and mine and a dozen others. But most folks can't hold out. Kane's been buying them up cheap, using debts and pressure and whatever else he can dig up. Dutch fixed her with a hard look. Your back taxes. That's not a coincidence. Kane probably had the county push those through just to give himself leverage. That son of a... He's a professional, Eliza. This is what he does. Find the pressure points and squeeze until people break. She stood, pacing. So, what am I supposed to do? Just hand over my land? I'm not saying that. Then what are you saying? Dutch set down his coffee. I'm saying you're up against something bigger than you. Kane's got money, power, and the law on his side. You've got grit and a rifle. That's not a fair fight. Since when have I cared about fair? Since it might get you killed. Eliza stopped pacing. She looked at the old man, at the concern in his weathered face, the worry in his eyes. What would you do? She asked quietly. Dutch sighed. I'd walk away, take what I could carry, and start over somewhere else. There's always another mountain. This one's mine. Not if you're dead. Then I'll die on my own land. Dutch shook his head. You're as stubborn as your grandmother was. She wouldn't quit either. And look where it got her. She died in her own bed, in her own home, on her own terms. Eliza met his eyes. That's all I want. The old man was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and pulled a folded paper from a drawer. He handed it to her. What's this? She asked. Deed to my land. If Kane comes for it, he'll find I already signed it over. To who? You. Eliza stared at him. Dutch, I can't. You can, and you will. I'm old, Eliza. I don't have the fight left in me. But you do. So take it. Combine it with your plot. Make it harder for him to carve up. He'll just come after you anyway. Let him. I'll tell him I got swindled by a pretty woman with a sharp mind. He'll believe it. Dutch smiled faintly. Besides, I always planned to leave it to you anyway. This just moves up the timeline. Eliza's throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Say you'll fight. Say you won't let that bastard win. She folded the deed carefully and tucked it into her coat. I won't. Good girl. He walked her to the door. One more thing. Kane's staying at the Woodsman Inn in town. He's got your stranger locked up there, probably trying to break him before he ships him east. If you're thinking of doing something stupid, and I know you are, you've got maybe 2 days before Kane moves him. Eliza pulled on her gloves. 2 days is plenty. For what? To do something stupid. Dutch laughed despite himself. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably. Want some company? She looked at him, really looked at him. He was old, yes, but his eyes were still sharp, his hands still steady. No, she said. But thank you. She mounted her horse and rode back into the night. When Eliza got home, Caleb was asleep on the bed, his face still blotchy from crying. She stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment. He looked so small, so fragile. She thought about what Rowan had said, about protecting him, about keeping him safe. And she understood. But understanding didn't mean accepting. She crossed to the table and lit the lamp, pulled out paper and a pencil, started writing. A plan, messy and half-formed, but a plan nonetheless. She worked through the night, scratching out ideas, crossing them out, starting over. By dawn, she had something that might work, or might get her killed. She'd take those odds. Caleb woke around mid-morning, his eyes red and swollen. He looked at her like he expected her to tell him it had all been a bad dream. Did Papa come back? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. No, Eliza said. The boy's face crumpled. But I'm going to get him, she added. Caleb looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You are? I am. How? I'm working on that part. Can I help? Eliza hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to keep the boy here, safe, out of harm's way. But she'd seen what happened when you tried to protect people by shutting them out. Rowan had tried that, and it had only made things worse. Maybe, she said carefully. But first, you need to eat. She made breakfast, thin oatmeal and the last of the bread. They ate in silence, both of them thinking about the empty chair at the table. Afterward, Eliza pulled on her coat again. Where are you going? Caleb asked. Town, to see what I can find out. I'm coming with you. No, you're not. Why not? Because it's dangerous. I don't care. I do. She knelt down so they were eye to eye. Listen to me. Your papa left to keep you safe. If I drag you into town and something happens to you, that sacrifice means nothing. You understand? Caleb's jaw set stubbornly. I'm not a baby. I know you're not, but you're also not bulletproof. She softened her voice. I need you here. I need you safe. Can you do that for me? He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, promise you'll bring him back. I can't promise that. Then promise you'll try. Eliza looked at this boy, this brave, broken boy who'd already lost so much, and she made a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. I'll try. Caleb nodded. Okay. She stood. Dutch might come by later. If he does, you let him in. If anyone else knocks, anyone, you hide. You understand? I understand. Good. She grabbed her rifle and headed for the door, paused, looked back. Caleb? Yeah? Your papa's lucky to have you. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. I know. Eliza almost smiled. Then she stepped out into the cold. The ride to town took most of the day. The road was still treacherous, the snow deep enough to slow her horse to a crawl. By the time she reached the edge of the settlement, the sun was already dipping toward the horizon. The town, if you could call it that, was little more than a main street lined with clapboard buildings, a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, and at the far end, the Woodsman Inn. Eliza tied her horse outside the saloon and went inside. The place was half empty. A few miners nursing drinks. A card game in the corner. The bartender, a woman named May, who'd been running this place longer than Eliza had been alive, looked up when she entered. "Well, well, Eliza Boone, haven't seen you in town since last spring." "Been busy." "I bet." May poured her a whiskey without asking. "What brings you down the mountain?" "Information." "About what?" "Victor Kane." The room went quiet. The card players looked up. The miners stopped drinking. May set down the bottle carefully. "You don't want to mess with Kane, girl." "Too late. He's already messed with me." "Then you should be running, not asking questions." "I'm done running." Eliza downed the whiskey. "Now, what do you know?" May glanced around the room. The other patrons suddenly found their drinks very interesting. "He's at the inn," May said quietly. "Been there 3 days, got a man with him, locked up in one of the rooms." "Just one man?" "And 2 guards. They don't let anyone near him." "What's Kane doing?" "Talking, threatening, trying to get the man to sign something, from what I hear." May leaned in. "Word is the man's refusing. Kane's getting frustrated." Eliza felt a flicker of pride. Of course Rowan was refusing. Stubborn fool. "How long before Kane gives up and moves him?" she asked. "Tomorrow, maybe the day after. He's got a wagon coming to take the man east." So Dutch had been right. 2 days. Eliza set a coin on the bar. "Thanks, May." "Eliza." The older woman caught her arm. "Whatever you're planning, don't. Kane's got the law in his pocket. You go after him, you'll hang." "Then I'll hang." "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." May's face softened. "Your grandmother wouldn't want this." "My grandmother taught me to stand my ground. That's exactly what I'm doing." She pulled free and headed for the door. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. Eliza stood on the wooden walkway and stared at the inn across the street. 2 guards. 1 Kane. And Rowan somewhere inside. She couldn't fight them head on. Couldn't shoot her way in. That was suicide. But maybe she didn't have to. An idea started to form. Dangerous. Stupid. Exactly the kind of thing Dutch had warned her against. Perfect. She walked back to her horse, pulled a bottle from her saddlebag, and headed for the general store. The owner, a nervous man named Petey, looked up when she entered. "Miss Boone, what can I do for you?" "I need rope, lamp oil, and matches." Petey's eyes widened. "What for? Does it matter?" "I suppose not." He gathered the items and wrapped them. "That'll be $2. Eliza paid and left. Back outside, she circled around to the rear of the inn. There was a window on the second floor, lit from within. Guards wouldn't be watching the back. Too confident, too lazy. She tied the rope to her saddle, looped it around a post, and started to climb. It took 3 tries. Her hands were cold, her grip unsure, but eventually she hauled herself up onto the narrow ledge outside the window. Through the glass she could see a small room, a bed, a chair, and Rowan, sitting on the floor with his hands tied, staring at nothing. Eliza tapped on the glass. Rowan's head snapped up. When he saw her, his eyes went wide. She motioned for him to open the window. He shook his head frantically and mouthed, "Guards!" Eliza held up one finger, waited. Inside she heard footsteps, a door opening, a gruff voice. "You need something?" Rowan's response was too quiet to hear. The door closed. Footsteps receded. Eliza tapped again. This time, Rowan stood, awkwardly with his hands bound, and crossed to the window. He struggled with the latch for a moment, then managed to push it open. Cold air rushed in. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. "Saving your ass. What does it look like? You need to leave. Now. If Kane finds you..." "Kane can go to hell." She pulled out a knife and reached for his hands. "Hold still." "Eliza, shut up and let me work." She sawed through the rope. It took longer than it should have. Her hands were shaking from cold and adrenaline, but finally the bonds fell away. Rowan rubbed his wrists. "You can't be here. It's too dangerous." "For who? You or me?" "Both of us." "Then we'd better move fast." She nodded toward the window. "Can you climb?" "Eliza, listen to me." Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Getting closer. Rowan's face went pale. "They're coming." "Then let's go." But it was too late. The door slammed open and one of Kane's guards filled the doorway. He took one look at the open window, at Eliza on the ledge, and shouted, "He's escaping!" Rowan didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed the chair and swung it hard into the guard's face. The man went down with a grunt. "Go!" Rowan yelled at Eliza. "Not without you. I'll be right behind you." More footsteps, more shouting. Eliza climbed out onto the ledge. Rowan followed, squeezing through the narrow window just as the second guard burst into the room. "Stop!" Rowan kicked the window shut and started climbing down the rope. Eliza was already halfway to the ground. A gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet splintered the wood inches from Rowan's hand. He dropped the last few feet, landing hard in the snow. Eliza grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the horses. Behind them, the inn exploded with noise, shouting, running, the sound of doors slamming open. They reached the horses. Eliza swung up onto hers and reached down. "Come on!" Rowan hesitated, looking back at the inn, at the men pouring out of it, at Kane, standing in the doorway with a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. "Rowan!" Eliza shouted. He turned and grabbed her hand. She hauled him up behind her, and they took off into the darkness. Gunfire followed them, shouts, the thunder of hooves as Kane's men gave chase. But Eliza knew these mountains, knew every trail, every shortcut, every place to hide. She led them through the trees, away from the road, into the wild, dark places where men like Kane didn't dare follow. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, and finally, there was only the wind and the snow and the pounding of her heart. They rode for hours, didn't stop until they were deep in the forest, miles from town, hidden in a place Eliza had used before when she needed to disappear. She dismounted and helped Rowan down. He was shaking, from cold or shock, she couldn't tell. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. You could have been killed. So could you. That's different." "How?" "Because I'm—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "Because this is my fight, not yours. It became mine the moment Kane stepped on my land." Rowan stared at her. Then, without warning, he pulled her into a fierce hug. Eliza froze. She couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged her. Slowly, she hugged him back. "Thank you," Rowan said quietly, "for not giving up on me." "Don't thank me yet. Kane's still out there, and now he's really pissed." Rowan pulled back, his face grim. "Then we need to end this. For good." "How?" "I don't know, but I'm done running." Eliza looked at him, at the determination in his eyes, the steel in his voice, and felt something shift. He wasn't a runaway anymore. He was a man ready to fight. "Good," she said, "because I've got a plan." "What kind of plan?" "The stupid kind." Rowan almost smiled. "Those are the best kind." They made it back to the cabin just before dawn. Caleb was asleep in the chair by the fire, Dutch sitting across from him with a rifle in his lap. The old man stood when they walked in. "About time." "We had company," Eliza said, shaking snow from her coat. Dutch's eyes moved to Rowan. "I see you found him." "More like she broke me out," Rowan said. "Course she did. Girl's got more nerve than sense." Dutch grabbed his coat. "Kane's gonna be looking for you. Both of you. I'd say you've got until noon before he comes up here with half the county." "Let him come," Eliza said. "You really think you can fight him?" "I think I can make him wish he'd never heard my name." Dutch shook his head but didn't argue. "I'll be at my place. You need me? Fire 3 shots. I'll come running." "Thank you, Dutch." The old man paused at the door. "Your grandmother would be proud of you, even if you are being an idiot." He left. Rowan moved to the fire and crouched beside Caleb. The boy stirred, opened his eyes, and for a moment just stared at his father like he might be dreaming. Then he launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around Rowan's neck. "Papa, you came back!" Rowan held him tight. "I told you I would." "No, you didn't. You left." "I know. I'm sorry." Caleb pulled back, his face fierce. "Don't do it again." "I won't." "Promise?" Rowan looked at Eliza, then back at his son. "I promise." Eliza turned away, giving them privacy. She started making coffee, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced ahead. Kane would come. That was certain. And when he did, He'd bring more than 2 guards and empty threats. He'd bring the law, maybe even a posse. He'd bring enough force to make sure Rowan didn't slip away again, which meant they had to move first. "We need to talk," she said, not turning around. Rowan stood, keeping one hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I'm listening." "Kane wants you back in Philadelphia. Wants you signing papers and playing the good little heir. That's not happening. I know, but he doesn't care what you want. He'll drag you back in chains if he has to." She poured coffee and handed him a cup. "So we need to give him a reason to leave you alone." "There's no reason he'll accept. The board owns him. As long as they want me back, he'll keep coming." "Then we change what the board wants." Rowan frowned. "How?" Eliza sat at the table and pulled out the newspaper Dutch had given her. She spread it flat and tapped the headline. "Says here you're the heir to the Hale fortune. Everything goes to you." "It does, but I can't access it without going back. The board controls it all." "What if you could access it from here?" "That's not possible. The will stipulates—" "I don't care what the will says. I care about what Kane believes." She leaned forward. "He threatened me with my debts, used them as leverage. What if we did the same to him?" "I don't follow. Kane's working for the board, right? He gets paid to bring you back. But what if bringing you back costs them more than it's worth?" Rowan sat down slowly. "You want to blackmail them. I want to make them an offer they can't refuse. You sign over enough of the railroad to keep them happy, but you do it on your terms, from here, with witnesses. And if they refuse, you make it public that they've been hunting you like an animal, threatening innocent people, breaking laws." She met his eyes. "Rich men hate scandals more than they love money." "That could work," Rowan said slowly. "But I'd need a lawyer, someone who could draft the documents and make them legal. There's a lawyer in town, name's Brennan. He's honest, far as lawyers go." "Will he help us?" "If we pay him, he'll help anyone." Rowan ran his hands through his hair. "Even if we get the documents drawn up, Kane won't just let me waltz into town and sign them. He'll grab me the second he sees me." "Not if the whole town sees him do it." "What are you talking about?" Eliza smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Kane's power comes from working in shadows. Threats behind closed doors, debts called in quiet. But if we drag this into the light, if we make it public, he loses that power. You want me to confront him in front of people? I want you to take back your life, in front of witnesses. So many witnesses that Kane can't touch you without everyone seeing what he really is." Rowan stared at her. "That's insane." "I know. It could get us both killed. Probably. And you're serious. Dead serious." He laughed, short and bitter. "You really are crazy. Takes one to know one." Caleb, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "I think it's a good plan." They both looked at him. "You do?" Rowan asked. "Yeah. You're always hiding, always running. I'm tired of it." The boy's voice was small but steady. "I want to stay somewhere. I want to have a home. And if we have to fight for it, then we fight." Rowan's face softened. He reached out and ruffled Caleb's hair. "When did you get so brave?" "I learned from you." "And Miss Eliza?" Caleb grinned. "Her too." Eliza felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. She cleared her throat. "All right, then we need to move fast. Kane's not going to wait around licking his wounds." "What do you need me to do?" Rowan asked. "First, write down exactly what you're willing to sign over. Make it generous enough that the board will take it, but not so much that you're left with nothing." "And then?" "Then we ride to town and make Kane an offer he can't refuse." They spent the morning preparing. Rowan wrote out terms, crossing out and rewriting until he had something that might work. Eliza cleaned her rifle and loaded extra ammunition. Caleb helped by staying out of the way and asking questions that neither of them could answer. Around mid-morning, Dutch showed up with news. "Kane's gathering men," he said without preamble. "Saw them at the saloon. 6, maybe 7. All armed. He's planning something." "He's coming here," Eliza said. "Probably, but not yet. He's waiting for something." "What?" "My guess, a legal writ. Something that lets him take you by force without it looking like kidnapping." Rowan swore under his breath. "How long do we have?" "Few hours, maybe less." "Then we move now." Eliza grabbed her coat. "Rowan, you're coming with me. Caleb, you're staying here with Dutch. No! Caleb's face went mutinous. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous. I don't care. Rowan knelt in front of his son. Listen to me. I need you safe. If something happens to me, I need to know you're with someone I trust. Nothing's gonna happen to you. Probably not. But just in case. He pulled the wooden horse from his pocket, the one he'd been carving by the fire. It was rough, unfinished, but recognizable. I want you to hold on to this. And if I don't come back, you will. But if I don't, I want you to remember that I love you, and that everything I did to keep you safe. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. You're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry. Rowan pulled him into a hug. Be brave for me. Can you do that? The boy nodded against his shoulder. Dutch stepped forward. I'll keep him safe. You have my word. Rowan stood and shook the old man's hand. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't get yourselves killed. We'll try. Eliza and Rowan rode hard toward town. The sky was low and gray, threatening more snow. The wind cut through their coats like knives. Halfway down the mountain, Rowan spoke. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I want you to take Caleb and run. Get him somewhere safe. Eliza glanced at him. You really think I'd leave you? I think you're practical enough to know when a fight's lost. And I think you don't know me as well as you think you do. He was quiet for a moment, then, why are you doing this? Doing what? Risking everything. Your land, your life. For me. For us. Eliza didn't answer right away. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, on the town slowly coming into view below. 12 years ago, she said finally, I came to this mountain because I had nowhere else to go. I'd lost everything. My family, my home, my future. I was so tired of fighting that I just wanted to disappear. What changed? Nothing. For a long time, nothing changed. I built my cabin, survived my winters, and told myself I was fine alone. She paused. And then you knocked on my door. Rowan said nothing. You and that boy reminded me what it felt like to have people under my roof again, to make coffee for more than just myself, to hear laughter that wasn't my own. She looked at him. I'm not doing this for you, Rowan. I'm doing it for me, because I'm tired of being alone, and because some things are worth fighting for. His expression softened. You're a good woman, Eliza Boone. I'm a stubborn woman. There's a difference. Not much of one. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Town was busier than Eliza had ever seen it. Wagons lined the street. People moved between buildings with purpose. And in front of the inn stood Kane's men, armed and watching. Eliza and Rowan dismounted a block away and tied their horses. Brennan's office is above the general store, Eliza said. We go there first, get the papers drawn up, then we make our move. And if Kane sees us, then we improvise. They moved quickly through the back streets, avoiding the main road, made it to Brennan's office without being spotted. The lawyer was a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when they entered, then did a double-take when he recognized Rowan. I know who I am, Rowan said, and I need your help. Brennan glanced at the door, nervous. Mr. Kane is looking for you. I'm aware. That's why I'm here. Rowan pulled out the papers he'd written. I need you to draft a legal transfer, railroad shares, land deeds, all of it documented and witnessed. Mr. Kane won't like that. I don't care what Kane likes. I'm paying you to do a job. Will you do it or not? Brennan hesitated. Then he looked at Eliza. You vouch for him? I do. And you'll keep Kane off my back if this goes south? I'll try. The lawyer sighed. Fine, but it'll take time to draft this properly. How much time? An hour? Maybe 2. Rowan shook his head. We don't have 2 hours. Give me something I can sign now, and you can formalize it later. Brennan's eyes widened. That's not how... I don't care how it's supposed to work. Just do it. The lawyer looked between them, then grabbed a sheet of paper and started writing. 30 minutes later, they had a document. It wasn't perfect, but it was legal enough. You'll need witnesses, Brennan said. At least 3, preferably more. Where do we get them? Town Square, it's market day. Half the county's here. Eliza and Rowan exchanged looks. You thinking what I'm thinking? She asked. Public spectacle? As public as it gets. They left Brennan's office and headed for the square. People milled about, buying and selling, gossiping and laughing. Normal life, oblivious to the storm about to break. Rowan took a deep breath. Here goes nothing. He stepped into the center of the square and raised his voice. My name is Rowan Hale. People stopped, turned, stared. Some of you know who I am, some of you don't, but all of you know Victor Kane. A murmur ran through the crowd. Kane works for the Trans Mountain Railroad. He's been sent to drag me back to Philadelphia, where the board wants to use me like a puppet. But I'm done running. I'm done hiding. More people gathered now, drawn by the commotion. I'm here to make this legal, to sign over enough of my inheritance to satisfy the board on my terms, with witnesses. He held up the document. Anyone who wants to see a man take back his life, step forward and sign your name. The crowd shifted, uncertain. Then May from the saloon stepped forward. I'll sign. A minor Eliza recognized followed. Me too. One by one, people stepped up. Not everyone, but enough. And then, from the back of the crowd, a voice rang out. That document means nothing. The crowd parted and Victor Kane strode through, his men flanking him. His face was cold, controlled fury. Rowan Hale is a fugitive from his legal obligations. Any document signed under these circumstances is null and void. That's a lie, Rowan said calmly. I'm not a fugitive. I'm a man exercising his legal right to manage his own affairs. You're a coward running from responsibility. I'm a father protecting his son. Kane's smile was cruel. Speaking of your son, where's the boy? Still hiding up on the mountain with Miss Boone? Eliza stepped forward. You leave him out of this. Oh, I intend to. Once Mr. Hale comes with me peacefully, the boy can stay wherever he likes, with whomever he likes. Kane's eyes gleamed. I'm even willing to overlook Miss Boone's interference last night. Chalk it up to misguided loyalty. How generous, Eliza said flatly. I think so, but my generosity has limits. Mr. Hale, you have one chance to do this the easy way. Come with me now, sign the proper documents in Philadelphia, and we can all go home. I am home. Kane's smile faded. Then we do this the hard way. He nodded to his men. They started forward, hands moving to their guns. The crowd backed away, frightened. Eliza raised her rifle. Don't! Kane's men stopped, but their guns were already drawn. You're outnumbered, Miss Boone, Kane said, and outgunned. Put down the rifle and walk away. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you threaten people on my land. We're not on your land. We're in town, public property. Then maybe you should ask the sheriff what he thinks about you pulling guns in his town. Kane's jaw tightened. The sheriff is on my side. Is he? A new voice cut through the tension. Actually, I'm not. The crowd parted again, and the sheriff stepped through. He was a grizzled man in his 50s, more cautious than courageous, but he had his hand on his gun. Mr. Kane, I've been patient with you. Let you conduct your business because I figured it wasn't my concern. But drawing weapons in my town, that makes it my concern. Kane's expression didn't change. Sheriff Daniels, I have a legal writ. I don't care about your writ. I care about keeping the peace, and right now you're disturbing it. This man is standing in a public square trying to sign a legal document. I don't see a crime in that. Kane's face went hard. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be the first time. The standoff held for a long, tense moment. Then Kane lowered his hand from his gun. His men followed suit. Fine, Kane said, his voice ice. Let him sign his paper. It won't matter. The board will contest it. They'll drag this through courts for years. And in the meantime, Rowan Hale will spend every day looking over his shoulder, wondering when I'll come back. Maybe, Rowan said, but at least I'll be looking over my shoulder on my own terms. He turned to Brennan, who'd been watching from the edge of the crowd. Bring the document. The lawyer hurried forward, hands shaking. He spread the paper on a makeshift table someone had pulled out. Rowan signed his name. Then the witnesses stepped forward, one by one, adding their own signatures. When it was done, Rowan held up the document. It's legal now. Witnessed by half the town. Try to contest that in court, Kane. See how far you get. Kane stared at him, his face unreadable. Then he smiled, slow and dangerous. You think you've won, he said softly. But you've just made yourself a target. The board won't stop. They'll find other ways to control you, other levers to pull. Let them try. Kane's eyes moved to Eliza. And you, Miss Boone, you've made an enemy today. I've had worse. Have you? He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. I know about your debts. I know you're barely holding on. And when the county comes to collect, when they auction off your land piece by piece, remember that I offered you a way out. Go to hell, Kane smiled. I'll see you there. He turned and walked away, his men following. The crowd watched them go, silent and wary. When they were gone, the square erupted in whispers. Eliza lowered her rifle, her hand shaking from adrenaline. Rowan put a hand on her shoulder. You all right? He asked. I will be. You? I've been better, but I'm free. He looked at the document in his hands, then at the people around them. Thank you, all of you. May stepped forward. You did good standing up to him. Took guts. Or stupidity, Rowan said. Sometimes they're the same thing. The crowd started to disperse, people drifting back to their business. The sheriff approached, his expression serious. You made a powerful enemy today, Hale. I know. Kane's not the forgiving type. He'll come back. I'll be ready. The sheriff studied him, then nodded. I believe you will. He looked at Eliza. You too, Miss Boone. You need anything, you let me know. I will. Thank you, Sheriff. He tipped his hat and walked away. Eliza and Rowan stood there in the emptying square, the document clutched in his hands, the weight of what they'd just done settling over them. We did it, Rowan said quietly. We did. Now what? Now we go home. They walked back to their horses, mounted up, started the long ride back to the mountain. But halfway up the trail, Rowan stopped. What is it? Eliza asked. He was staring at something ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the path, Dutch. And he looked terrified. Eliza's blood turned to ice. Where's Caleb? Dutch's face was ashen. They took him. Who? Kane's men. They came while you were in town. I tried to stop them, but... His voice broke. They took him, Eliza. They took the boy. Rowan went perfectly still. Then he wheeled his horse around and kicked it into a gallop, racing back toward town. Eliza followed, her heart pounding, her mind screaming one thought over and over. They had the document, but Kane had Caleb. And that changed everything. By the time they reached town, Rowan was half out of his mind. He hit the ground running before his horse even stopped, storming toward the inn with murder in his eyes. Eliza barely managed to grab his arm. Wait, she hissed. They have my son. I know, and if you go in there guns blazing, they'll kill him just to prove a point. Rowan's chest heaved, his whole body shook with rage and fear. Then what do we do? Eliza's mind raced. Kane had anticipated this, had probably planned it from the start. Take the boy, force Rowan's hand, make the document worthless. We trade, she said. Trade what? You. For Caleb. No. Rowan's voice was flat, final. I'm not putting myself back in that cage. Then what? You want to storm in there and hope for the best? If that's what it takes, and if they shoot him first, if Kane puts a gun to his head and dares you to try something? Eliza grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. You can't think like a father right now. You have to think like a strategist. He's my son. I know, and that's why we're going to get him back. But we do it smart. Rowan's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded. What's the plan? Eliza glanced around. The street was quieter now, most folks having gone home after the spectacle in the square. But she spotted May watching from the saloon doorway. Come on, Eliza said. They crossed to the saloon. May let them in without a word and locked the door behind them. Kane's got the boy upstairs at the inn, May said. Saw them bring him in about an hour ago. Kid was fighting like a wildcat, but they had him outnumbered. How many men? Eliza asked. 4, maybe 5, plus Kane. Armed? All of them. Rowan slammed his fist on the bar. I should have seen this coming. Kane's a bastard, but he's a smart bastard, May said. He knew you'd sign those papers, knew it'd mean nothing if he had leverage. So he took my son. Rowan's voice was hollow. What does he want now? Same thing he's always wanted. You, back in Philadelphia. The boy's just insurance. Eliza paced, thinking, then stopped. What if we gave Kane what he wants? We're not really, but what if we made him think we were? She turned to May. You still got that old wagon out back? The one you use for deliveries? Yeah. Why? Because we're going to need it. 20 minutes later, Eliza walked into the inn alone. The lobby was empty except for one of Kane's men sitting near the stairs. He stood when she entered, hand moving to his gun. I need to see Kane, Eliza said. He's busy. Tell him Rowan Hale wants to make a deal. The man's eyes narrowed. Where is Hale? Somewhere safe, and he'll stay there unless Kane agrees to talk. The guard hesitated, then went upstairs. Came back a minute later and jerked his head. Come on. Eliza followed him up to the same room she'd broken Rowan out of the night before. Kane sat behind a desk, looking relaxed. Caleb was in the corner, hands tied, face defiant. When the boy saw Eliza, his eyes lit up. Miss Eliza! I'm okay, Caleb. Everything's going to be okay. Kane smiled. Miss Boone, I was wondering when you'd show up. Where's Rowan? That's what I should be asking you. Eliza kept her face neutral. He's willing to come in, willing to go back to Philadelphia, but only if you let the boy go first. Kane's smile widened. And I'm supposed to just trust that he'll follow through? You have my word. Your word means nothing to me. Then what do you want? I want Rowan Hale standing in this room within the hour. I want him to tear up that ridiculous document he's signed, and I want him on a train east by morning. Kane leaned forward. And if he doesn't show, the boy takes his place. He's 7 years old. Then his father should have thought of that before he ran. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Kane stood and walked to the window. You have 1 hour, Miss Boone. After that, I assume Mr. Hale has chosen to abandon his son, and we proceed accordingly. Eliza looked at Caleb. The boy was scared, but trying not to show it, just like his father. I'll get him, she said. I know you will. She turned to leave, then stopped. Kane? Yes? When this is over, you and I are going to settle accounts. He laughed. I look forward to it. Eliza walked out, every muscle in her body screaming to grab the boy and run. But she couldn't. Not yet. She met Rowan outside in the alley behind the inn. Well? He asked. He wants you here in an hour, wants the document destroyed, wants you on a train by morning. And Caleb? Kane says if you don't show, he takes Caleb instead. Rowan's face went white. That's not happening. I know. Eliza grabbed his arm. Which is why we're not waiting an hour. She led him to where May had the wagon ready. It was loaded with barrels, empty ones, but Kane wouldn't know that. What's this for? Rowan asked. Distraction. May's going to drive this wagon right up to the front of the inn. Make a big scene about a delivery. While Kane's men are dealing with that, we go in through the back. There's still 4 of them, maybe 5. I know. Eliza checked her rifle. That's why we're bringing help. Sheriff Daniels stepped out of the shadows, along with 2 deputies. Sheriff, Rowan said, surprised. I'm not Kane's man, Daniels said gruffly. Never was. But I've got a town to protect, and I can't have armed men holding children hostage. He looked at Eliza. May filled me in on your plan. It's stupid, but it might work. That's the nicest thing anyone said about my plans all week, Eliza muttered. Just don't get yourselves killed. I've got enough paperwork as it is. They moved into position. May drove the wagon up to the front of the inn, shouting about a delivery. Kane's men came out to see what the fuss was about. Eliza, Rowan, the sheriff, and the deputies slipped in through the back. The stairs creaked under their weight. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. One wrong move, one creaky board, and this whole thing fell apart. They reached the second floor. Voices came from the room at the end of the hall. Kane's voice, irritated, and one of his men responding. Rowan moved toward the door, but Eliza held up a hand. She pointed to herself, then to the door, mouthed the word talk. Rowan shook his head, but she ignored him. She knocked. The voices inside stopped. What? Kane's voice sharp. It's Eliza Boone. I've got Rowan with me. The door opened. One of Kane's men stood there, gun drawn. Behind him, Eliza could see Caleb still tied up in the corner, and Kane standing by the window. That was fast, Kane said. Where is he? Right here. Rowan stepped into view, hands raised. Kane smiled. Good. Now. The sheriff and his deputies burst through the door behind them, guns drawn. Nobody move. Kane's men reached for their weapons, but the deputies were faster. One of them fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. I said don't move. Kane's face went cold. Sheriff, you're making a very large mistake. The only mistake here is you thinking you can take a child hostage in my town. I have legal authority. You have jack shit. Now tell your men to drop their weapons. For a moment, nobody moved. The room hung in tense, fragile balance. Then Caleb did something that changed everything. He bit the guard closest to him. The man yelped and stumbled back. Caleb kicked his shin and ran for his father. Caleb, get down! Rowan shouted. Everything happened at once. Kane lunged for the boy. Rowan tackled Kane. One of Kane's men drew his gun, and Eliza shot it out of his hand. The sheriff's deputies moved in, wrestling the other guards to the ground. It was chaos. Violent, messy, desperate chaos. Eliza grabbed Caleb and pulled him behind her, using her body as a shield. The boy clung to her, shaking but unhurt. When the dust settled, Kane's men were on the floor, disarmed and pinned by the deputies. Kane himself was against the wall, Rowan's forearm pressed to his throat. Give me one reason, Rowan said quietly, why I shouldn't break your neck right now. Kane smiled, even with a forearm cutting off his air. Because you're not a killer. You're a coward who runs from his responsibilities. You took my son. I was doing my job. Your job? Rowan's voice rose. Your job was to kidnap a child? My job was to bring you back, by any means necessary. Rowan's arm pressed harder. Kane's face started to turn red. Rowan, Eliza said quietly. Don't. He deserves it. Maybe. But Caleb's watching. Rowan's eyes flicked to his son. The boy was staring at him, scared and wide-eyed. Slowly, Rowan stepped back. Kane gasped for air, rubbing his throat. You'll regret this. I doubt it. The sheriff stepped forward. Victor Kane, I'm arresting you for kidnapping, assault, and threatening an officer of the law. You can't arrest me. I have connections. Save it for the judge. Daniels nodded to his deputies. Take him. They hauled Kane to his feet and dragged him out. His men followed, cuffed and cursing. When they were gone, the room went quiet. Rowan knelt in front of Caleb and pulled him into a crushing hug. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Papa. Caleb's voice was muffled against Rowan's shoulder. I knew you'd come. Always? I'll always come for you. Eliza turned away, giving them privacy. She walked to the window and stared out at the street below. Townspeople were gathering, drawn by the commotion. May was down there, talking to them, probably spinning the story in their favor. The sheriff approached. That was close. Too close. You did good, Miss Boone. I just did what needed doing. That's usually how it goes. Daniels tipped his hat. I'll make sure Kane gets locked up tight, and I'll send word to the railroad board about what happened here. Might not mean much, but it's something. Thank you, Sheriff. He left. Eliza stood alone at the window, watching the street, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she felt a small hand slip into hers. She looked down. Caleb was standing beside her, his face serious. Thank you for saving me, he said. Eliza's throat tightened. You saved yourself. That bite was something else. Papa taught me to fight dirty when I have to. Smart man, your papa. Caleb squeezed her hand. Are we safe now? I think so, for now. Good. He leaned against her side. I was scared. I know, so was I. Really? Really? You didn't look scared. That's the trick. You act brave even when you're terrified. Eventually, the acting becomes real. Caleb thought about that. Then quietly, I want to go home. Me too. Rowan joined them at the window. He put his arm around Eliza's shoulders, tentative, testing. She leaned into him just a little. What now? He asked. Now we go back to the mountain. Figure out what comes next. The board will send someone else. Eventually. Let them. We'll handle it. We? Eliza looked at him. At this man who'd stumbled into her life in the middle of a storm and turned everything upside down. Yeah, she said. We. Rowan smiled. It was a real smile this time, not the tired, haunted thing she'd seen before. It reached his eyes and changed his whole face. I'd like that. They left town as the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. The three of them rode together on Eliza's horse, Caleb in front, Rowan behind, Eliza in the middle. Dutch met them halfway up the mountain, relief flooding his weathered face when he saw Caleb safe. Told you I was too old for babysitting, he grumbled, but his eyes were wet. You did fine, Eliza said. I let them take him. You're 1 man against 5. You did what you could. Dutch didn't look convinced, but he nodded. You need anything. You know where I am. I know. The old man rode off toward his cabin, and they continued up the mountain. When they reached Eliza's cabin, it looked different somehow, smaller, more fragile, but also more like home. Rowan built up the fire while Eliza made soup. Caleb sat at the table, drawing pictures of the day's adventure with exaggerated heroics and minimal accuracy. They ate together, the three of them, in comfortable silence. Afterward, Caleb climbed into bed without being asked and fell asleep almost immediately. Eliza and Rowan sat by the fire, watching the flames. I need to tell you something, Rowan said. Eliza looked at him. What? Before I left with Kane that first time, I did something. Something I probably should have mentioned. What'd you do? I paid off your debts. Eliza froze. You what? The back taxes, the money you owed the county. I paid it all, used what little cash I had left. He looked at her. I wanted to make sure that even if Kane got me, you'd be safe. Your land would be safe. Eliza stared at him, 100 emotions warring in her chest. Anger that he'd made that choice without asking. Gratitude that he'd thought of her. Confusion about what it meant. Why? She asked finally. Because you saved my son's life. Because you gave us shelter when you didn't have to. Because... He stopped, searching for words. Because you deserved it. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. I don't need saving. I know that too. He smiled faintly. But sometimes people do things for each other, not because they have to, but because they want to, because it matters. Eliza's defenses, so carefully built over 12 lonely years, cracked just a little more. How much did you have left? She asked quietly. Enough to get by, for a while. And then what? Rowan shrugged. I'll figure it out. I always do. You could stay. The words hung between them, fragile and heavy. Rowan looked at her. Here? Here. With us. With me. Eliza took a breath. I've got land. You've got skills. Together we could build something. Something real. Eliza, I'm not asking you to marry me or make promises you can't keep. I'm just saying there's room here for you and Caleb, if you want it. Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he reached out and took her hand. I'd like that, he said, more than you know. Eliza squeezed his hand. Then it settled. Just like that? Just like that. They sat there by the fire, hands clasped, watching the flames dance and listening to Caleb's soft breathing from the bed. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow started to fall again, light and gentle this time. But inside, the cabin was warm. The weeks that followed were hard but good. Rowan threw himself into work, expanding the cabin, building a proper shed, reinforcing everything that needed reinforcing. Eliza taught Caleb how to read using her grandmother's old books. Dutch came by most evenings to play checkers and complain about the weather. News filtered up from town. Kane had been transferred to a federal court for trial. The railroad board, facing public scrutiny and bad press, had quietly appointed a new administrator and distanced themselves from the whole mess. Rowan's signed document stood, giving him a modest but steady income without requiring his presence in Philadelphia. He was free. One morning in early spring, Eliza woke to the sound of laughter. She stepped outside and found Rowan teaching Caleb how to fix the fence. The boy was struggling with the wire, getting tangled, laughing at his own mistakes. Rowan was laughing too, patient and encouraging. Eliza stood there watching them, coffee in hand, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the empty peace of solitude, the full, complicated peace of people who mattered, of family, chosen, and hard-won. Rowan looked up and saw her, smiled. "Morning," he called. "Morning. Coffee ready?" "Always." He said something to Caleb, ruffled the boy's hair, and walked over. Took the cup from her hands and drank, then handed it back. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About putting in a real garden, maybe some chickens. Build this place up proper." "That's a lot of work." "I've got time." "You planning to stay that long?" Rowan looked at her, his eyes serious. "I'm planning to stay as long as you'll have me." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "That might be a while." "Good." Caleb ran over, breathless and excited. "Miss Eliza, can I have a dog? Papa says maybe if you say yes." "Did he now? Don't drag me into this," Rowan said, but he was grinning. Eliza looked at the boy, at his hopeful face, his bright eyes, the way he'd started calling this place home without even realizing it. "We'll see," she said. Caleb whooped and ran back to the fence. Rowan shook his head. "You know that means yes to him." "I know. So we're getting a dog." "Seems like." "You're getting soft, Eliza Boone." "Don't push your luck, Rowan Hale." He laughed and kissed her forehead. Quick and casual, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eliza froze. Then slowly she smiled. Maybe she was getting soft. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The months turned to seasons. Summer came, hot and bright. They planted the garden, got the chickens, even got the dog, a scrappy mutt Caleb named Hero. Dutch passed away in his sleep that fall, peaceful and in his own bed like he'd wanted. They buried him on his land with a simple marker and no fuss. Eliza inherited his property officially, combining it with hers, making something bigger and stronger than either piece alone. By winter, the cabin had grown into something more. An addition for Caleb, a proper kitchen, a porch where they could sit and watch the snow fall. Eliza stood on that porch one evening, wrapped in a blanket, watching Rowan and Caleb build a snowman in the yard. Hero barked and ran circles around them, destroying more than he helped. She thought about that first night, the desperate knock and the storm, the choice she'd made to open the door. It had changed everything. Rowan looked up and caught her watching. He said something to Caleb, then walked over. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky we are." Rowan put his arm around her. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought for this. We all did." "Maybe," she leaned into him, "but I'll take it either way." Caleb called out from the yard. "Papa, Miss Eliza!" "Come see. Hero knocked over the snowman." They looked at each other and laughed. Then they walked down into the snow together, into the mess and the noise and the beautiful chaos of the life they'd built. Eliza Boone had come to this mountain 12 years ago with nothing but grief and a need to disappear. She'd survived alone, carved out a life from stone and will, and told herself it was enough. But it hadn't been. Not really. Now surrounded by the people she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back, she finally understood what enough felt like. It felt like home. It felt like belonging. It felt like waking up every morning and knowing you weren't facing the world alone. The snow fell soft and steady, covering the mountain in white. Inside the cabin, the fire burned warm. Outside, a family laughed and played and built something that would last. And Eliza Boone, who'd spent so long protecting herself from hope, finally let it in. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real, and real was enough.